When did we become so fearful of failure and setbacks? And I'm really just asking rhetorically because I don't even know the answer, but I just know that there's a transition period where when we're children, we're explorative, we're curious, and we don't let things hold us back. We're not focused on the fear and the setbacks. And at some point, as we become adults, it creeps in more that we do focus on those things. And I got reminded of this recently as my second son is just now starting to learn how to walk. And I remember very clearly when my first son was learning how to walk, I had taken him outside. He had his first pair of shoes on, put him outside on the grass, and it was like a nice sunny day, beautiful day. And I just plopped him on the grass and he took a few steps in the grass and then he fell. And then he would get back up, took a few steps, fell. And he did this at least 15, 20 times, just kept stepping, falling. And he kept going at it again and again and again. And that really is how we learn. And it's so clear when you see children learning skills, especially young children when they're learning how to crawl and walk, and it happens so quickly, but you can literally see the neuroplasticity occurring. They're making the connections. And the only way these connections are made are through these failures. And as my son was learning how to walk, he was gaining information every single time he fell. Oh, my weight is a little too far to the right, fell. Weight is a little too forward, fell, and he started to make these connections of like, this is how I do it. This is how I stay on my feet. And now he's 4 years old. He's running all over the place, but he had to go through that process of learning what does not work in order to figure out what does work. And we've all gone through that process. For anyone who's listening to this, you've learned something in your life where you maybe were not perfect the first time and you've had setbacks, you've had failures, but it brought you to a place where you were able to gain skills that allow you to do what you do today. But along the way, we've been focused on this fear of failure. Like we can't ever have failure. We try to avoid it at all costs. And now our energy and our focus gets directed at the repelling of failure rather than embracing it and realizing that this is part of the process. This is actually a gift. When we fail, we learn. And from my son, there were so many little messages that I saw in that really bring it to light of what we need to focus on. And for him, when he was learning how to walk, it was all about perspective. So if he had a very short-minded perspective that I fell and that's the only thing he was focusing on, he would have stayed on the ground because it would have been maybe scary to him and he would have focused right on the fact that he had fallen and that was his perspective. But when he had a longer perspective and a more expansive perspective that I want to get to this point where I can walk and this is not the end, there's more to it. And again, cognitively, we can say these things, but this is what's going on in the background of the processing, that there's this curiosity that these children have and our children have that keeps them having a larger perspective, that they can see beyond what's going on immediately in front of them, that he fell, but he had this awareness that there's more to it and that he can get up. There's also this meaningful pursuit. And when we talk about failure, if we don't have something that's meaningful and that we're pursuing, it can very easily knock us down. But when something is meaningful enough, any kind of setback is going to just be a bump in the road because something will pull you forward. It will pull you in a direction because it's so meaningful. And again, using my son as an example, when he was learning to walk, he's watching us walk, he's watching other people walk. So deep down, there's something that tells him, I want to learn how to do this. This is important to me. And so regardless of how many times he kept falling, there was enough meaning behind that he wanted to learn that skill, that the falls would not keep him back from learning that skill. So when we are going through things, we have to have a meaningful pursuit, that pursuit of something that is something we desire, that is something we really want to allow in our lives. And regardless of what we go through, those little setbacks will just be just that, minor little setbacks, but they will actually give us a lot of information of how we can get to that desired goal. And so failure, again, can be really fearful for a lot of people. We always tend to think of those things like, well, what if this happens? And then we think of the worst case scenario. And especially if you're someone who tends to have your mind go in all different directions and you literally think of the worst case scenario, we can create a situation in our brains where there really is an actual fear response, and we can get fixated on the fact that failure is possible. And in everything, failure is possible. But if we can start moving ourselves to a place where we can recognize failure and reframe it, then we can start using it for the gift that it really is. And just like the example of my son learning how to walk, failure was a gift for him. He learned from every single time he fell what he needed to do better and what he needed to do differently so he could be successful. And so what failure is it's a gift of resilience. It's teaching us that even if things don't go exactly as we plan or envision, that we will be able to handle it and bounce back from that. And having resilience in our life is everything. There are a lot of unpredictable situations that happen in our lives. And if we always have this internal dialogue that I've been through failure, I've been through setbacks, I can overcome this, then that is a huge driving force of keeping us moving forward. It's also a place of creativity and innovation. So a lot of times the first idea we have doesn't always work. And so it forces our brain to come up with something more creative, more innovative. So it is a big force in growth and creativity within ourselves. So again, if it's that first time we do something, we may not be perfect. There may be setbacks, but those setbacks are going to make us even a better version of ourselves where we can really propel ourselves forward and gain all the insight that these failures and setbacks teach us. So there's huge gifts that these things, that failures and setbacks give us to make us a constantly evolving version of ourselves. And looking back on my life, failure was something that I was fearful of because I wanted perfection. I wanted everything to come naturally and easily to me. And it did not always happen like that. In a lot of cases, it did not happen like that. And looking back, there were a lot of failures I had to go through. And I look back at jobs that I've had, and I wouldn't call them successes. I mean, I did well in them, but for me, it was not fulfilling. So it felt almost like a failure. But I look back on that and I'm so grateful that they were not, were not where I stayed, and that I learned from what I didn't want at those jobs, because it has propelled me forward to start doing something that's been more fulfilling and embrace a more fulfilling process in my life. And I'm so grateful that those things didn't work out in my life. I look back on past relationships and I'm like, thank God those things didn't work out. That would have been terrible. I'm glad they failed because it forced me to grow and realize like I'm worthy of more. So those failures have also catapulted my life forward as well. And just I look at skills. There are a lot of things that didn't go well the first time. Maybe I look back, might have been a little embarrassing, like things that I've done, but I look back and then I'm so grateful for it because it taught me something. Every single thing that felt like a setback, felt like the end of the world at the time, in perspective, looking years back and where I am now, I'm so grateful for all the things that did not work out as I had planned and were setbacks and were failures, because I learned a tremendous amount that has allowed me to pull my life forward in a better direction. So I want you to look at failure and setbacks in your life not as a point of something that's wrong with you, that you didn't do something well and that you can't get back from. Try reframing it in a way that, okay, how is this serving me? And just that simple question of how is this serving me? Asking yourself that, writing it down. How could this setback or failure possibly be serving me? Now, when you ask yourself those questions, you start to allow your brain to come up with solutions to that. And you'll start to see an evolution of how they actually are placed in your life to push you forward, allow you to evolve and grow. And it may be hard in the middle of that setback, but when you feel like you're able to really recognize that, start asking yourself that question: how is this serving me? And you will get answers that make you realize that every little thing that maybe we didn't want in our life at the time actually has been a blessing in disguise. And I wanted to share that. So for anyone who has experienced setbacks and failures, think about yourself as a child, all the things that maybe you failed at initially, but have allowed you to grow and expand and be skillful and have this depth of knowledge throughout the course of your life. And I wanted to share that with you because there's so many amazing things we can learn from failure.